The magnolia tree. The first time I saw her fall, I screamed. She fell from the roof of the house across the street, a woman in her late 60s, falling 2 stories onto the hard ground. I screamed for my parents, but when they ran outside, there was no one there. They told me I just had a nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare, and it wasn't the first time I had seen her either. It really began a week earlier. My name is Cody. When I was just 7 years old, my family lived across the street from Miss Annabelle. She was a kind, frail old woman who always smiled at me and gave me peppermint candies. I adored her, but then she passed away. She had taken her own life, hanging herself from the ancient magnolia tree in her front yard. My family was away on vacation when we got the news. By the time we returned, the funeral was over. My parents didn't tell me the truth, only that she had gone to a faraway place. I was too young to understand, and only felt sad that I wouldn't be getting any more of her candies. A few weeks later, on a humid night, I went out onto my second-floor balcony, and I saw her. She was sitting on a branch of the magnolia tree, her legs crossed, chewing on something. I was overjoyed. "Miss Annabelle, you're back!" She didn't answer, just glanced at me with a cold look before jumping down from the high branch. She landed with a dry thud, then staggered into the darkness behind her house. I thought she must have hurt herself in the fall, but didn't think much more of it. A few nights later, when I was on the balcony again, I saw her once more. This time, she was standing on her roof, right at the very edge of the shingles. She stood there, waving at me to come over and play, and that's when she fell the first time, the fall that made me scream and that my parents dismissed as a nightmare. The next day at school, I saw Billy, Miss Annabelle's grandson. He was a few years older than me and a bit of a bully. "Hey, Billy," I asked cheerfully, "is your grandma okay after her fall? I saw her fall off the roof last night." Billy didn't say a word. He just lunged forward and punched me square in the face. When I got home with a black eye, my parents couldn't hide the truth any longer. They sat me down and told me what had really happened. Miss Annabelle had passed away. I didn't understand what dead meant. I only knew that the Miss Annabelle I was seeing was no longer a person. My parents started to worry. They were afraid that her spirit, perhaps because she had been so fond of me, would try to take me with her. The next day, they took me to the town church. While my parents were talking to the pastor, I ran out to the church's backyard to play. There was a small garden and a columbarium, a small building where urns of ashes were kept. And I saw her again. Miss Annabelle was standing at the door of the columbarium, smiling gently and waving for me to come inside. I was happy to see her and ran after her. I followed her inside. The room was small, lined with marble niches. I ran in looking for her, but she was nowhere to be seen. And then the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind me. The room was plunged into darkness. I started to get scared. I banged on the door and screamed, "Dad! Mom! Help me!" I was only trapped in there for a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, my parents and the pastor were able to get the door open. I ran out sobbing and told them that it was Miss Annabelle who had locked me in. After that, my mother bought me a remote-controlled car I'd always wanted. As I was happily playing with it, she sat down beside me. "Finian," she said gently, Do you know about angels? Miss Annabelle is an angel now. She's gone up to heaven, a very beautiful place. For the first time, I began to understand. So, I won't ever see her again? You won't see her here anymore, my mother said, but she will always be watching over you and loving you. The next day, my parents took me to the cemetery. We stood before her new grave. For the first time, I felt a real sense of sadness. I placed a small flower on the fresh earth and whispered, I love you, Miss Annabelle, but I have to stay here with my mom and dad. Please don't take me with you. From that day on, I never saw her again. Although sometimes, when I'd stand on my balcony at night, I would still get the feeling that someone was standing on the branch of the magnolia tree across the street, quietly watching over me. One by one. My name is Ethan. I was born and raised in Portsmouth, South Carolina, a small coastal town where life has always been tied to the ocean. My family and most of the kids I grew up with are part of the Gullah Geechee community, an African-rooted culture filled with deep traditions, folklore, and beliefs about the sea and the spirits of the dead. My childhood was spent on fishing boats, on beaches covered in seashells, and with the constant sound of crashing waves. Everyone worked the water, catching fish, shrimp, crabs. That was life, simple, peaceful, until one day. A few years ago, a massive energy corporation came to our town. They built a huge offshore wind farm, dozens of white giants rising from the sea. From that day on, the fish stopped coming close to shore. Our fishing life slowly died out. Families abandoned their boats, moving inland, turning to shrimp farms instead. But for us kids, the turbines became something else, strange and fascinating. We would ride our bikes to the beach just to stare at them. Those spinning blades cut through the sky like something unnatural. And then, the strange things began. The first death was Mr. Miller, one of the engineers. He fell from the top of a turbine and hit the water. They pulled his body out hours later. The authorities called it an accident. But people whispered, maybe he hadn't slipped. Maybe something had pulled him down. Then came Mr. Jenkins, a tough ex-soldier hired as a guard. Night after night, he swore the turbine lights flickered in patterns like signals. He heard voices calling his name from the ocean, and one night he claimed he saw a faceless figure floating beneath the waves, circling the turbines. Jenkins quit and never looked back. And then came the night that changed everything for me. One night, my friends Sam, Jake, and I were hired to watch over a barge loaded with construction material, anchored about a mile off the coast near the wind farm. We brought beer and snacks, planning to stay up until dawn. Around midnight, Sam spotted a faint green glow near one of the turbines. I'm gonna check it out, he said. Jake and I begged him not to. Don't be stupid, Sam. Even the guard ran away from that place. But Sam didn't listen. He took the rowboat and vanished into the fog. Minutes later, the light went out. Sam didn't come back. Then, out of nowhere, we heard screaming. It wasn't Sam. It was Leo, another friend of ours, working a different barge not far away. We rushed over, paddling through the heavy fog. When we reached him, Leo was drenched, shaking, pointing at a turbine. "It's him, Miller. He's climbing up there." We turned our lights toward it and froze. There, crawling up the massive tower, was a dark figure in an engineer's uniform, but it had no face, just a black void. It moved slowly, spider-like, vanishing into the fog above. Leo's voice cracked as he explained. When the fog rolled in, he felt someone standing behind him, cold, dripping. He turned and saw Sam, but Sam's face was twisted, water gushing from his mouth as he grinned. Sam didn't speak. He just pointed at the turbine. Then he vanished, and Miller appeared, climbing upward. We never found Sam. The next morning, his empty rowboat drifted ashore. Inside were his jacket and flashlight. It was as if Sam had never existed at all. They said Miller's spirit had been trapped in the turbines, and that now he was dragging others with him into his loneliness. As for Leo, he left town soon after. He never touched the sea again. I still remember his last words before he left. "I saw the mouth of the ocean open." A month later, Jake and I went fishing near the coast. We caught nothing. Out of frustration, Jake pulled out an old car battery and a cable. He wanted to use electricity to shock fish to the surface. Illegal, dangerous, but he didn't care. I begged him to stop, but he threw the cable into the water anyway. A few dead fish floated up. Jake laughed, and then we heard laughter. Not ours, not human. The laughter of a child. It was Sam's laugh. The water around us began to bubble. I swear I saw pale, tiny hands tugging at the cable, pulling it deeper. Electricity surged back up the wire. Jake convulsed, screamed, then collapsed on the deck, dead. The cable still crackled in the water. The laughter still echoed, rising and falling with the waves. I tried to shove the wire away with a wooden pole, but the moment it touched the water, a violent jolt ripped through me. I dropped it instantly, and in that flash, I saw Sam's face beneath the surface. Eyes rolled white, smiling. That night, I lost everything. Sam, Leo, and now Jake. No one believed me. They said Jake's death was an accident, but I know better. I quit the sea. I don't fish anymore. But sometimes when I look out at the horizon, I see them, the turbines spinning endlessly, and beneath them, in the water, shadows dancing, waiting. They're still out there, and they're waiting. One night, sitting on my porch, I thought I'd left it all behind. The wind carried the salt of the ocean, familiar but bitter, and then I heard it. Ethan, a voice, a whisper, Sam's voice. It didn't come from my head. It came from the shoreline, from the sea, calling my name. I stood frozen. Then, every street light in town went dark at once, and out there, in the black water, the turbines glowed faintly green, blinking, signaling, calling me back. The ghostly bridegroom. I will never forget my neighbor's wedding. Not because it was beautiful, but because that was the day I was tricked into a Ming-Hoon, a marriage with the dead. My name is Xiao Mei. I was 17 years old, living in a small village in rural Sichuan. My neighbor Shufan was a kind and beautiful young woman, but her love life was cursed. 3 times she had been betrothed, and 3 times her marriage collapsed right before the ceremony. That year, She was finally preparing for her wedding again, but something about it was wrong. At the banquet, a strange Taoist priest appeared, wearing archaic robes, muttering incantations under his breath. He circled the room, asking the names, birth dates, and birth hours of all the young women in the village, including mine. Shufin, the bride, should have been radiant. Instead, she looked pale, anxious, and sorrowful. Throughout the night, her eyes followed me, filled with guilt. Finally, she came over. "Xiao Mei," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you for coming. I don't have much to give you, but please, take this candy as a token." It was a milk candy. Strange, but I accepted it politely. As I unwrapped it and placed it in my mouth, she stared at me with tears welling in her eye. Days later, the nightmares began. A man in an old-fashioned groom's suit appeared, pale-skinned, with eyes as black as ink. He called me by another name. "Shufin, you are my bride. Come with me." He was violent, dragging me into the darkness. When I woke, my wrists and ankles throbbed, bruised as if I had been bound. Terrified, I told my mother. She was deeply superstitious and rushed me to a local priest. After hearing my story, his face drained of color. "You've been tricked," he said gravely. "They used you as a substitute. Shufin was haunted by a restless spirit, a groom who died before his wedding. Her family gave you candy as a vessel to fool the ghost into thinking you were his bride. They forced her fate onto you. He gave me a protective talisman and strict instructions. The spirit will come for you 2 more times. The first time, when he drags you away, do not resist. But once you step outside your door, scream your true name. The second time, he will only call for Shufin from afar. No matter what you hear, do not answer." That night, clutching the talisman, I fell asleep trembling. The first dream, I was no longer in my bedroom. Instead, I stood inside a bridal chamber, red silk drapes, carved wooden furniture. Everything draped in dust and mold. The groom was waiting. His suit was spotless, but his skin was corpse pale. His black eyes burned with a possessive hunger. "Shufin," he crooned, his voice both tender and chilling. "At last, you're here. I've waited so long." He took my wrist. His grip was ice cold. "It's time. Let's go." He dragged me toward the door. Beyond it was no hallway, only a swirling void of black mist. My heart pounded. I remembered the priest's words. I let him pull me forward just until my foot touched the freezing fog. Then I screamed with all my strength. "I am not Shufin. My name is Xiao Mei." The groom froze, his face twisted with confusion, then rage. "Lies," he roared, his handsome features warped into a grotesque mask. The red chamber crumbled into rot. I woke up screaming, my wrist aching as if fractured. The second dream. A few nights later, the final dream came. This time, I was safe inside my house. Outside the gate, the world was swallowed in gray mist, and there he was. The groom stood in the fog, no longer furious, just lost, lonely. His wedding clothes were damp, disheveled, his shoulders slumped with sorrow. He didn't look at me. Instead, he stared down the empty road, his voice cracked with despair. "Shufin, where are you? I promised I'd come for you." "Shufin?" He called her name again and again, his voice breaking like a grieving lover. My chest ached with pity, but I remembered the warning. I stayed silent. At last, his figure flickered, faded, and dissolved into the mist, leaving only a whisper on the wind. I woke up in tears. The bruises were gone, the curse was broken. After that night, I never saw him again. My family was furious at Shufin's family for deceiving us, but my father stopped them. "Let it be," he said. "They were desperate. They did what they thought would save their daughter." And it worked. After that cursed wedding, Shufin lived peacefully. Her parents never met my eyes in the marketplace again, their guilt unspoken. As for me, sometimes I still wonder, did Shufin ever think of the price that bought her peace? And somewhere in the afterlife, does that lonely groom still wander through the fog, calling the name of the bride he was promised but could never claim? One good, one evil. This story comes from Skylar. Skylar got into a university in Seattle, Washington. She'd planned to live in the dorms, but her mother was worried. Her mom remembered an old family friend, Joan, lived in Seattle. Even though they hadn't seen her in a decade, her mom called. "Joan, it's me. My daughter Skylar is starting at the university. Could she possibly stay with you?" Coincidentally, Joan's house was an old townhouse, squeezed between two larger commercial buildings, just a few miles from the campus. It looked dark and compressed. "Of course," Joan said. "My daughter's old room is empty. She just moved out to live with her boyfriend, so the room is free. Just have her chip in for food and utilities. No rent." Her mom was thrilled and insisted she go. Skylar arrived. The house was a tall, narrow, 4-story townhouse. Skylar's room was on the 3rd floor, fully furnished, even with an AC unit. She was happy. While moving in, Skylar overheard Joan telling her mom, "Well, I got it for a steal. The previous owner had issues, so it was cheap. But I figure there's a good one and a bad one, and they probably cancel each other out. It's fine." Skylar didn't understand what that meant, but she ignored it. The house was crowded, with Joan's husband and a few other relatives and their small children. Skylar started to notice strange things after a few days. Joan was extremely devout. She was always inviting a priest over. She had turned the attic into a small prayer room, and the priest would come to bless the house almost weekly. Also, the kids in the house were terrified of the attic. They'd stand on the stairs, looking up with wide, scared eyes, but would never go up. A few weeks passed. Then, things started happening to Skylar. First, it was the heat. In the middle of the night, even with the AC blasting, and despite Skylar's habit of sleeping completely nude, she would wake up burning like she was in a sauna. Sweat drenched her, the air thick and stifling. But the moment she sat up, the heat vanished instantly, replaced by the icy blast of the AC, making her shiver. Next were the sounds. In the dead of night, she'd hear muffled chanting and the faint click-clack of rosary beads echoing from the attic above. The next morning she asked, "Hey, Joan, were you in the prayer room late last night?" Joan shook her head. "No, honey, I was fast asleep. You probably just heard street noise." Skylar studied a lot. She loved going up to the attic to study. It was quiet, and the incense Joan burned was calming. But while she was up there, she'd often smell a burning smell, like burning paper, burning wood, and scorched meat. She'd run downstairs, thinking something was on the stove, but the kitchen would be empty. The further she got from the attic, the weaker the smell became. Another time, she heard a loud bang, like someone had kicked the altar up there. She ran up to check. Nothing was out of place. These things kept happening. Skylar was starting to get scared. The climax came one night. Joan was having a party downstairs. It was loud. Skylar couldn't study, so she took her folding table and books up to the attic. She studied for hours, exhausted. She eventually fell asleep, her head resting on her desk. She was woken up by a click-clack sound. She tried to lift her head, but she couldn't. It felt like a heavy hand was pressing her head down onto the desk. She could only barely lift her eyes. A priest wearing a white alb and a purple stole, the color of penance, was standing at the altar, his back to her, holding a Bible and sprinkling holy water. But his vestments were tattered, scorched, and burned. The smell of burnt flesh was overwhelming. The priest was chanting and flicking holy water, and he spoke, his voice empty. "Don't come up here anymore, child. Don't come up here." He murmured for a moment, then slowly walked to the right and walked straight through the solid wall behind the altar and disappeared. The second he was gone, Skylar could finally sit up, her body aching. She was terrified. She grabbed her books and ran down to her room. Just as she got to her door, Joan caught her. "Oh, Skylar, my friend's daughter Megan is spending the night. She'll sleep in your room, okay?" Skylar was still shaking from the ghost, but hearing she'd have a roommate made her feel safe. "Yes, okay, that's fine." But Skylar didn't know that, a little while later, Megan and her mom decided to take a taxi home instead. Skylar, thinking Megan would be in later, scooted over to the far edge of the bed to make room, and fell into an uneasy sleep. In the middle of the night, Skylar felt someone get into bed, then roll over, bumping hard against her shoulder. She woke with a start. "Oh, it's just Megan." She turned over, annoyed, to tell Megan to move. She put her hand out to push her shoulder. The moment she touched it, Skylar recoiled. The shoulder she touched, it was heavy and hard and rough like sandpaper, but also sticky and disgustingly hot. She scrambled for the bedside lamp and flicked it on. In the weak yellow light, Skylar saw what was lying next to her. It was a charred black body, a naked man. His hair was scorched off, its skin was cracked and black, and the sickening smell of burnt flesh filled her nose. It turned its charred head. It had no eyes, no nose, just a gaping mouth. It was looking at her. Skylar screamed and passed out. She woke up on the floor, alone. She crawled out of the room, ran downstairs, and sat trembling on the living room sofa until sunrise. When Joan came downstairs, she found Skylar huddled on the sofa, sobbing. "Skylar, what's wrong, honey? Why aren't you in your room?" It was only then that Skylar broke down, hysterically telling her everything. The heat, the chanting, the priest, and finally, the charred corpse in her bed. Joan's face went pale. She sighed. "I'm so sorry, child. I'm so sorry. I really thought you'd be okay. I've been here for years and haven't seen anything. Only the kids. They're afraid of the attic. Last night, Megan went home. I forgot to tell you." Joan finally confessed the truth. The house was haunted. When she bought it, the realtor had told her. The house had a fire 10 years ago. The original homeowner, a man, died in that fire. A few years later, a new family moved in. They called a priest to perform an exorcism, but a candle fell. Another fire started, and the priest also burned to death in the attic. The house had 2 ghosts. The priest, the good spirit, the one who was chanting, was the one trying to warn Skylar, "Don't come up here anymore." And the original homeowner, the evil one, he was the one who caused the sweltering heat and the one who appeared as a burnt corpse in her bed. Skylar was terrified and demanded to move out. Joan didn't argue. She felt so guilty she found Skylar a studio apartment nearby and even paid her security deposit. Skylar still visits Joan for dinner sometimes, but to this day, she will not set foot past the 2nd floor of that townhouse. Guthrie. This story comes from Chase. Chase said he was just 18 at the time, just starting his first real job. He was a general laborer in San Bernardino, California, working at an industrial adhesive plant, a place he described as toxic. Across from the factory was a low-income housing complex. Every day on his way to work, Chase would see a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, always clutching a pitifully old teddy bear. It was so worn, its fur was matted, and one of its button eyes was just dangling by a thread. He never spoke to her, but the image stuck with him. He privately named the bear Guthrie. About 3 or 4 months after Chase started, disaster struck. One morning, Chase drove his car to the plant and saw the flashing police lights from a distance. As he got closer, he saw police cars parked outside, barricades, yellow tape everywhere, and a small, curious crowd. Chase saw a fresh, dark stain on the road. "God, what happened?" he asked. "The kid from the apartments," an older coworker replied. "Happened maybe an hour ago. They say she ran into the road to get a toy. A semi-truck hit her." Chase knew exactly who it was. He just felt sick. A few days later, the accident scene outside was cleaned up, and everything went back to normal. Chase was assigned to take the hazardous waste out to the dumpster area behind the plant, and there, lying on the ground next to the dumpster, he saw it. Guthrie. It was filthy, one eye now completely gone and smeared with industrial glue. Clearly, the family had thrown it out. He didn't think much of it, tossed the trash, and went on with his work. The next morning, Chase drove his car into his usual spot. He'd just shut off the engine and was leaning over to the passenger seat to grab his bag when he heard a soft thud from the front of the car. He looked up, and his heart stopped. Right on the hood of his car, sitting up and facing him, was Guthrie. It was still dirty, still missing an eye, but looked like someone had quickly wiped it clean. Chase was 18 and very superstitious. He ran into the factory. A few of the younger guys were snickering, watching him. "What?" Chase snapped. They tried to hide their laughs. Chase knew immediately. "Those bastards. They know I'm spooked by that stuff and they're messing with me." He angrily grabbed the bear, marched to the dumpster, and threw it back in. "Grow up, you assholes!" Chase went back to work. Victor, the main prankster, and the others were laughing. Later that afternoon, Chase was on kettle duty, a heavy job, constantly stirring a huge boiling vat of adhesive. He turned his back for less than 5 seconds to grab a new bag of chemicals. When he turned back, he put the heavy steel paddle in to stir. It hit something solid at the bottom. Chase looked down. The glue was still clear, and Guthrie was at the bottom of the hot, boiling vat. "What the hell?" Chase yelled. No one had come near him. He used the paddle to fish the bear out. It was dripping with hot, sticky glue. He set it aside to cool off and went back to stirring. 20 minutes later, he went back to throw the ruined bear away. It was gone. Chase felt a real chill, but he tried to force it out of his mind. The next morning, Chase drove his car into the lot. He looked everywhere, cautiously. Nothing. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it was over. He locked his car and turned to leave. He only took a few steps when he heard a faint clink of metal. He turned back. Guthrie was sitting on the hood of his car again. He was furious. He grabbed the bear and threw it in the dumpster. That evening, Chase drove home. He decided not to give Victor a chance to prank him again. He didn't throw the bear in the factory dumpster. Instead, he tossed Guthrie into the trunk of his car, planning to throw it in a public dumpster far away from the plant. After dumping the bear, Chase continued his drive home. He turned on the radio. He was happily singing along when the radio suddenly cut to static. The music was drowned out by the giggling of a child, coming right through the car speakers. Chase frantically shut the radio off. The giggling stopped. I must be just tired from work," he told himself. He got home, exhausted, and went straight to bed. In the middle of the night, he woke up choking on the thick chemical smell of the adhesive plant. He switched on his lamp. The room was empty, but his hands, they felt sticky. He looked down. A small smear of clear glue was on his fingers. He was too tired. He ignored it and tried to sleep, but just as he was drifting off, he felt a weight press down on his chest on top of the blankets. He opened his eyes. Guthrie was sitting on his chest. Its single hollow eye socket was staring right at him, and from its torn mouth, a child's whisper filled the room. "Why did you throw me away? I just want to play." Chase screamed, kicking the bear across the room and running out of the house. He immediately called Victor, his voice shaking. "I know it was you, you asshole!" "You broke into my house," he yelled, explaining what happened. But Victor sounded terrified. "I swear to you, Chase, I only put the bear on your car that one time. I didn't follow you home." Chase understood. This wasn't a prank. This was real. In his desperation, he finally understood. The girl died running to get this bear. Her young, lonely spirit was attached to it. She wasn't evil. She just wanted to play. He didn't run away again. He took a deep breath, went back into his house, and picked up Guthrie. He drove back to the factory in the middle of the night. He walked over to the spot on the road where the accident happened. He placed the teddy bear down on the curb. "I'm sorry," Chase's voice trembled. "I didn't mean to throw you away. I didn't know. Don't follow me anymore. Stay here." He set the bear down and backed away. The second he did, he said it was like a switch was flipped. The oppressive feeling in his chest vanished. The smell of chemicals disappeared. The giggling in his head went silent. Chase got in his car, drove home, packed his bags, and moved out that night. He quit the factory the next day and never went back. Sometimes, spirits aren't always meant to frighten. They're just fragments of lives lingering, clinging to the most innocuous things. And you'll never know what secrets the old forgotten toy in the corner of your room is quietly holding. Laughed at by a ghost. This story comes from Madison. It happened when she was about 7 or 8 years old. Madison was an only child, and her parents spoiled her rotten. The family wasn't rich, but she was very high maintenance. Every time she got sick, she demanded a private room, and she had to have a new doll every single day. That year, the family was visiting relatives down in the Florida Keys, a place famous for mosquitoes. Madison got bitten up badly. A few days later, she developed a high fever. On the drive back to Miami, she was delirious. As soon as they got into the city, her parents took her to an expensive private clinic. They ran blood tests and confirmed it the next morning. Madison had dengue fever, and it was a severe case. The clinic wasn't equipped for it. They immediately called an ambulance and transferred her to a large public hospital in the city. At first, her parents managed to get her a private room, but Madison was still fussy and crying. 2 days later, her condition worsened. The doctor said, "This isn't good. We need to move her to the special observation room." This new room wasn't private. It was a standard 2-bed ward. Even though it had central air, it felt stuffy and old. When Madison was moved in, there was already another boy about her age in the other bed, also sick with dengue. The 2 kids took turns crying. One day Madison would wail, the next day the boy would. 2 days later, the boy was discharged. Madison was in a deep sleep. Dengue fever makes you sleep constantly. Her parents saw him leave and felt hopeful, thinking their daughter would probably be next. But that night, it was just Madison and her mom in the room. Her dad had to drive back home for work. Madison slept all day. Around 9 or 10 p.m., she woke up completely and couldn't get back to sleep. Her fever was down, but her spoiled nature was not. She started to whine. "Mom, Mommy, I'm tired. I'm thirsty." As she was whining, she heard a sound. He. A little giggle. She looked over to the opposite bed. In the dark, she could just make out a small figure wearing the standard hospital-issued pajamas. It was the boy from yesterday. Huh? He didn't leave? Madison felt embarrassed. He's laughing at me for whining. She immediately went quiet, turning her head away but stealing glances. It's none of his business if I'm crying. She thought it was weird. Usually a patient's bed is cluttered with bags, clothes, and toys. That bed was completely bare, just the boy, sitting cross-legged giggling. Madison turned back to her mom, this time whispering so the boy wouldn't hear. Mom. Her mother, exhausted from days of care, was fast asleep in the sleeper chair pulled up next to the bed. "Mommy," Madison called, tapping her mom's shoulder. Her mom didn't budge. The boy giggled again. Madison was getting upset. She was about to yell louder when the door to the room opened. Squeak. A doctor walked in. He was wearing a white coat and holding a clipboard. He didn't even look at Madison. He walked straight to the other bed. His back was to her as he leaned over the boy, fiddling with something. Madison heard the click of a stethoscope. Then the doctor said in a low, gravelly voice, much better. You're all healthy. You can go home tomorrow. You've been here too long. He mumbled with the boy for a bit. Then he suddenly turned his head toward Madison's bed. His voice got louder and meaner. You're just fine. Stop all that whining. You're not half as sick as this boy, and he's not crying. You're a spoiled, loud child. Madison was stunned. She was being scolded by a strange doctor. She was so shocked, she just stared. Just then, Madison really had to pee. Mom, I have to go, Mommy! This time, her mother woke up. Huh? Oh, okay, let's go. She groggily got up and lifted Madison out of the bed. As her mom carried her, Madison instinctively glanced at the other bed, worried the boy would laugh at her for being carried. But the bed was empty. No doctor, no boy. Just a bare mattress covered in blue vinyl. Huh? Madison said, confused. What is it, honey? The boy and the doctor? There's no one there. Your roommate went home this afternoon. Come on, let's go. Her mom took Madison to the bathroom down the hall. On the way back, Madison was still upset. No, he was there, and he was laughing at me. And the doctor was mean. You have to go tell them off. He's all alone. Honey, her mom said, you were just dreaming. Besides, it's the middle of the night. The doctors are asleep. They were walking back. Their room was right next to the doctor's on-call room. As they passed the on-call room, the door was open. Madison looked inside. She froze. The same doctor from before was sitting at the desk, looking stern. And the little boy was sitting on top of the desk, giggling. Mom, there! Madison yanked her mom's hand. That's him! He's the one who yelled at me! And the boy is laughing! Her mother turned and looked. The door was open, but the room inside was dark, empty. Oh, honey, her mom said, now truly worried. You're really sick. You're hallucinating. No, he's right there. Why can't you see him? They were arguing, making noise. Suddenly, a different doctor, a young guy, came out of the on-call room, rubbing his eyes. He'd clearly been asleep on a cot in the corner. Hey, what's all this noise? This is a hospital, not a playground. Madison looked at the new doctor. Not you, the other doctor, the old one sitting at the desk with the little boy. She pointed again. The desk was empty. Where'd they go? They were just there. The young doctor, who had been annoyed, suddenly froze when Madison mentioned the old doctor and the little boy. His expression changed. He looked at Madison, then at her mother, and his voice softened. Hey, you must be tired. It's okay. You go back to your room and sleep. I'll make sure they don't bother you. Tomorrow I'll check on you, and if you're all better, we'll send you home, okay? I'll even buy you some candy. He was trying to soothe her. Her mom, embarrassed, said, Yes, thank you, doctor. Sorry. She led Madison away. As they turned to go, both Madison and her mother saw it. The young doctor turned back, looked at the empty desk, and quietly made the sign of the cross before going back to his cot. Madison's mother saw it, and she knew in that instant that her daughter wasn't lying. That night she didn't sleep. She sat awake, holding her daughter's hand until morning. The next day, that same young doctor came by. He fast-tracked Madison's discharge, sending her home a day early, even though she was still a little weak. He clearly didn't want her staying there another night. Years later, her mom told her the full story. She said she knew from the doctor's reaction that the hospital was haunted, but Madison never remembered the faces of the doctor or the boy. All she remembered was how embarrassed she was that a ghost had laughed at her. Don't leave leftovers. This story happened back in 2000. At the time, my best friend Shane and I, along with our wives, were in a dangerous line of work, illegal logging in the national forests up in Oregon. The money was incredible, but since it was all illegal, banks weren't an option. We just had stacks of cash hidden all over our houses. My wife and I already had our own place, but Shane and his wife, Jenna, were still renting. They were desperate to buy a piece of land and build a house. After about 6 months of work, Shane saved up enough. He told me he'd just bought a cheap cabin in a remote town. The next day, my wife and I drove out for the housewarming. As soon as I saw it, I was disappointed. Jesus, Shane, why didn't you wait a few more months and buy something new? This place is a wreck. The damn toilet is still an outhouse out back. Shane just laughed. I was impatient, man. This cabin's real old pre-war. Nobody's fixed it up, so it's still got the outhouse. But the land is good, close to the highway. We bought it cheap, we'll do a few more runs, get another stack of cash, and then we'll tear this dump down and build a new one. I figured that made sense. That day, our whole logging crew came over to celebrate. We had a massive barbecue, drinking all day. That night, Shane insisted we stay. You're my best friend, man. You gotta stay. The four of us went inside. Our wives were tired and went to bed first. Shane and I stayed up drinking for another hour. By 11:30, Shane was completely passed out. I had to drag him to his room and dump him on the bed next to Jenna. I went back to my room, and my wife wrinkled her nose. God, you stink like a brewery. Go wash your face in the outhouse before you get in this bed. She was annoyed, so I had to go. I was drunk myself, stumbling across the dark yard toward the outhouse. As I got close, I heard a noise, rustling, tearing, coming from a pile of trash bags next to the outhouse where they'd dumped the party leftovers. Must be a raccoon, I thought. We're in the middle of the woods after all. I walked over, planning to scare it off. But when I got closer, I saw a man squatting, his back to me, his head buried in the trash bags. It's Shane, I thought. He was complaining he was hungry earlier. Is he so drunk he's eating leftovers? God, that's disgusting. I walked up and slapped him on the shoulder. Shane, what are you doing? That's gross. Come on, let's go to bed. The figure froze. Then, very slowly, he turned around. I was drunk, but I will never forget that sight as long as I live. It wasn't Shane. The man's back was covered in thick black bristly fur, hard and sharp like porcupine quills. When he turned his face, his eyes were glowing, bright red like two hot coals. His mouth was full of trash, chicken bones, old vegetables, and when he snarled at me, his teeth were pointed like a shark's. He looked at me, and he growled. I was paralyzed. I fell straight back, then scrambled, crawling and crab-walking back to the house. I didn't even scream. I just burst into the cabin, slammed the door, and locked it. Our wives were asleep. Shane was dead to the world. I tried to tell Shane, shaking him. He just mumbled, You're hallucinating. There's a ghoul. Let me sleep. I was furious. Fuck you. I just saw a ghoul. I'm scared, and you're laughing at me. Some best friend. I was so angry, I woke my wife up. We're leaving. Get up. We're going home. The two of us stormed out of the cabin, got in our truck, and I floored it all the way back to our house. I was so mad I didn't talk to Shane for a month. At the end of the month, my wife got a pager message from Jenna. The two of them had still been talking. They met up. When my wife came home, she said, Honey, Shane sold the cabin. He lost a ton of cash on it. He believes you about the ghoul. He's been haunted. He's sick, and he wants to apologize. That night, I drove over to the new rental house they were in. Shane looked awful. He was pale and thin. You were right, he said. I saw it too. Shane told me that after I'd stormed out, he'd invited the crew over again a few nights later. That night, after everyone left, his wife also told him to go wash up. He went out to the outhouse and he heard the same rustling. He got curious and went to look, and the ghoul turned around. Shane said, I saw its red eyes, its sharp teeth, its mouth full of garbage, I was so scared I backed up, tripped on a rock, and passed out. The rest of the story was from Jenna. She waited and waited for Shane to come back inside. Finally, she went out to find him. She didn't see the ghoul. She just saw Shane, kneeling by the trash bag, stuffing handfuls of garbage into his mouth, his eyes rolled back in his head. She knew he was possessed. She screamed, ran, grabbed a piece of firewood, came back and just started beating him on the back with it. "Get out of him! Get out! Get out!" She hit him so hard, the wood splintered. Shane let out one last animalistic growl and then just collapsed, unconscious. Jenna had to drag him back inside. When he woke up the next day, he came down with a horrible fever, sick for a week. They sold the cabin immediately. Shane said, "I don't know what it was, man, but I think it had been starving for a long time." After that, Shane and I made up. We continued logging illegally for a few more years, made our stake. Now, we've gone straight. We both run legitimate woodworking shops. Every once in a while, we'll get together for a beer, and we always joke, "Hey, eat up, finish your plate. Don't leave any leftovers. I'm still scared." The Ranch House in Denver. My name is Ava. In 2014, when I had just turned 18, I married Liam, a man 12 years older, steady, protective, and the kind of husband every girl dreams of. After our son was born, we decided to leave our cramped apartment behind and rent a small ranch-style house in the quiet suburbs of Denver, Colorado. It seemed like a dream. Cheap rent, plenty of space, and a backyard for our baby to play in. But from the very first day, something about the house was off. All around the house were wooden shelves nailed to the walls. They were bare, except for a single candle on each one. None had ever been lit. And in the living room sat a low wooden table. Upon it rested two plain wooden boxes, one larger, one smaller. The moment Liam carried them outside to clean, our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, came running. Panic etched into her wrinkled face. "Don't touch those," she cried. "The last owners. They had to bring in a minister to bless the house because of them. Please, just leave them where they are." Liam laughed it off, muttering about superstitions. He wiped the boxes down and set them back in place. At first, life was good, but little by little, Liam changed. His temper grew short, his patience frayed. The man who once held me tenderly began to glare with eyes full of rage. One night, after a trivial argument, he snapped. His eyes turned bloodshot, unnaturally so, glowing with a reddish hue. He lunged at me, hands wrapping tight around my throat. For 5 terrifying seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then, as suddenly as it came, the red light in his eyes blinked out. He dropped me, shaking, horrified at himself. I don't know what came over me, he whispered, but it didn't stop. Another night, he shoved me so hard I fell against the wall. Before I could recover, his fist struck my shoulder over and over, always the same side, the left. That night, I dreamed of a woman running through our house, clutching the hand of a little girl. Both were barefoot, terrified. The woman's nightgown was stained with sweat, and then, out of the dark, a kitchen knife plunged into her left shoulder. When I woke, Liam's left shoulder had erupted into an angry welt, festering and oozing pus. And then came the whispers. In his sleep, he called out strange names: Eleonora, Sophia. His lips moved as if in conversation, answering voices only he could hear. Soon the activity spread to me. Some nights I awoke to the faint sound of a child crying in the hallway. I would creep out, trembling, only to find nothing. Yet when I looked down, I'd sometimes see tiny wet footprints leading away from the bathroom toward the living room. And the candles, those untouched candles, began to change. Some mornings we'd wake to find wax dripping down the sides as if they had burned while we slept. The worst came one night when I found Liam standing before the table, clutching a glass of water. He tilted it, trying to pour into the wooden boxes. When I called his name, his head snapped around. His eyes glowed crimson once more. "They're thirsty," he snarled, his voice not his own. "Why won't you give them water?" Before I could react, he lunged, his hands crushing my throat. "Why won't you feed my wife and child?" he bellowed. I fought him off, stumbling backward in tears. After that, we sought help, priests, mediums, anyone. But each one, after stepping foot inside, turned pale and refused. "There is something here, something hiding behind the others," they muttered. "Something is masking itself." Finally, desperate, I reached a famous psychic in New England. At first, over the phone, she believed Liam was haunted by the spirits of a dead wife and child. But when my mother-in-law swore Liam had never married before, the psychic grew silent. She flew to Colorado herself. The moment she entered, her gaze locked onto the two wooden boxes. She placed her hand on them and whispered, "These hold the ashes of a woman and her little girl. They were murdered, stabbed, strangled by the husband, the father." Then, her eyes flicked toward the kitchen's shadowed corner. Her expression hardened. But he wasn't alone. There's something else. Something far older, a parasite. It doesn't kill, it whispers. It whispers until jealousy blooms, until rage explodes. It fed on the husband back then, and now it feeds on yours. Her voice dropped to a command. "Leave. Leave this house tonight. This is not a haunting. This is a nest." We fled with only what we could carry. As we sped away, we glimpsed Mrs. Gable waiting under her porch light. Seeing our terror, she finally confessed. The house's former owner was a violent drunk, consumed by jealousy. One night, convinced his wife was unfaithful, he stabbed her through the shoulder with a kitchen knife and strangled his daughter. Then, he slit his own throat. The police had removed the bodies, but the ashes, no one ever claimed them. Weeks later, I phoned the psychic to thank her. Her final words froze my blood. "The mother and daughter were victims. They've tried to warn you, not harm you. But the other thing, that ancient thing, it's still there, watching. It watched as a family died in that house, and it watched as your family began to fall apart. That's what it craves, not blood, not souls, just the collapse." Her voice trembled, and it's still watching, even now.